Hi, my name is Benedict. This video is about the process of sending multitracks or stems. Now, I use the terms interchangeably. When I first started hearing this term, a stem quite literally was what now people call multitracks. I understand Bob Clearmountain, who I respect tremendously, has said, well, okay, let's demarcate. So if it's all the individual tracks, like here's just the kick, then we'll call that multitracks. But if it's a pre-mixed section, we'll call it stems. I don't disagree simply because it's Bob Clearmountain and we probably need a definition, but I'm as likely to call them stems because stem came from that you have your track and then you have your stem, your plant on it. Don't want to get into that argument, but I raise it simply because quite early on you will encounter these two different ideas and people get very narky and one-uppy about it. The reality is that for a long time, stems was what now people insist are called multitracks. Yes, because back then often you just simply sent over the tapes. So you put a cardboard box with your 24-track tape on a reel in the truck and couriered it over. It's just a new technology settling itself down. Now, there are rules about how you send stems or multitracks to people. And I'm going to be real honest, the first time or three that you do it as an artist, it is going to be a little harrowing. And it's easy to not want to do it. And it's easy to try to cut corners. But, like anything in life, every time you shave a little bit off, you've got to ask yourself, are you really having a win, or are you losing more than you take off? Just as I pointed out to someone recently on something or other about they were wanting to be lazy about how they generated fans. And I said, look, bearing in mind that as an indie act, you're probably counting fan acquisition at any given moment on time on one hand. And that's probably pretty generous. That if you do something like get lazy in how you sing your song, so it's not a passionate performance. I don't care about whether you're auto-tuned or not, but if you give a dispassionate performance, one where you're going, oh, it doesn't matter because it's going to be fixed in the mix, you've shaved a little bit off. And you might go, it doesn't matter because auto-tune's going to make me so exciting and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, while you think, oh, well, I've only taken, like 1% off, let's say that 1% translated into 20% less fans. If you were going to get 5 fans from the recording of this one song, and that's pretty darn decent in real number terms. I know that's not the numbers you want to hear. You want to hear that you get 50 billion fans just because you farted in a glass jar. But let's be realistic here. If by being a bit lazy on your singing, you shaved off 1% of your effort, you lost 20% of your fan uptake, your 5 goes to 4. That hurts. But if your acquisition was going to be 2, 20% off could mean 1. I know that's a horrible rounding, but nonetheless, it's borderline enough that you might go from 2 to 1. So you might actually have a 50% loss in being that little bit lazy. So really, strong advice on how to set up and send stems, multitracks, whatever. I'm just going to call them stems for now because it's just going to be easier than me constantly correcting myself. Now, I'm going to show you those from a client of mine called Jake. If you follow me, you'll have seen quite a bit from Jake. Jake's a super cool guy. He sits with me as I do this work, and he's like a sponge. He just absorbs everything that I say and do. It's super cool, but I see the results. He sees the results as well. The first time he brought me something, there was a Hammond B3 line in it, and it was pretty darn flat. And I talked with him various ways that we could make it seem more like there was an actual B3 player involved in this, not just a MIDI file. Next time he bought me a B3 line, it was like, haha, you've done what we talked about. and now his B3 lines, he's probably not quite at Huey Lewis's B3 player level, but his B3s sound like somebody who actually knows what a B3 is. So really, the moral there is soak up this kind of information. So Jake sends me stuff, and Jake's super good with how he does it. This one's kind of small for some of his work, but kind of big for this project. This project is light country. So we've got 44 tracks, so that's more than most of you will get most of the time. I am used to up to 200 with him, which is a mission. He's good. He gives me the tempo. Most of the time when I get somebody sends me stuff across, especially if it's the first time or sometimes even the third or fourth time, they don't give me the tempo. Now, while it is possible to mix without the tempo, it means that I am not able to lock to tempo. I got something that was actually sent, a rock song that was in 3/4, but they didn't tell me it was in 3/4. I could never get it to lock. And some things ended up being completely moved to the wrong place. And I had no way of knowing, in part because A, they hadn't given me the actual tempo information to help me lock in the first place. So I'm just, freeballing it. And of course things went astray, but they also didn't send me a guide mix. Now look, Jake gives me the tempo, he also gives me a guide mix. So what I will do, and different DAWs will behave differently, but they're all essentially the same, I will take his tracks and drag them in. With the one, doesn't take long to do. So I now have his guide mix. I will put this in at the beginning. We can see that the tempo looks like it matches up right away. So I've now got photos. Now a guide mix is not about how well can you mix this to try to prove to me how great a mix engineer you are. Not at all. This guide mix is purely about, here are all the things that you've got in the stem pack. They're all brought roughly up to where I think I want them to be for this track to work. So it's a really natural, quick balance. I don't care whether it has reverb. I definitely don't want to hear side chaining and all kinds of I'm trying to prove how uber I am, because you know what? One of us is a professional mix engineer in this equation, so let's work that way. Let's not waste our time doing things that we're not here to do. So I get this guide mix. It helps me know what's in here. Because when I go through here, when I'm listening to a section, I might go, oh, I can hear banjo. Where's that banjo? Now, with Jake, I know I'm not going to worry because that banjo is going to be labelled banjo. I don't think there's a banjo in here, but if there is, it's going to be labelled banjo. The other great thing that Jake does, has always done, but does really well now because he knows how I work and he knows the order in which I'm going to put all his tracks once they've come in, is that he actually numbers everything. So not only are they named well, hi-hat closed, hi-hat open, crash 1, crash 2, ride, toms, what have you. He'll tell me commonly the instrument that's used. In many ways I don't care, but at the same time there have been times where I've gone, is that your Tele or your Strat? So he knows that I might process those a little differently. But that's more under me listening to it and going, oh, okay, that's the musical line. But nonetheless, he's differentiating these. He's got his guitars all together, and they're differently enough named. And in this case, it looks like they're named based on their function, and that is great as well. And then the acoustics. Transistor organ. My, we are going down. He puts his sound effects in, and then he names who's singing. In this case, it's just him, but he commonly brings backing vocalists as well, so it could be Emily or Courtney or Zane or Mike or Mark or whoever. It's very clear who is singing. And that's great because that helps me to orient on which voice belongs to which person. And therefore, if I've decided I'm doing this with, say, Zane's vocals, I can put Zane's vocals together. But, again, they will all be numbered. They'll all be ordered. I've got another client who does that as well. He's got a slightly different numbering system, so I can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 13, 21, 22, 28, 30, 40. It's a good system. It works. By being numbered, they're now all in order. I'm not having to try to randomly work out what's what. The person who sends it, like you, if you're the person who's looking at sending stems to a mix engineer, you know what's going on, but don't assume that the person who's receiving it knows what's going on. And it's actually a very high-stress time for a mix engineer when they get this stuff come in. And you might think, oh, but that's, why should it be? This is their job. Yeah, but understand the nature of mix engineers. A lot of us are actually on the autism spectrum. And you might think, we don't care about your medical problems. Well, you probably should care about our medical problems, because some of the greatest mix engineers, record producers, lighting engineers are all spectrum people, autism. Very, very common in this industry, and it's a massive advantage. Our strange laser-like precision to looking at certain things, whilst, especially in the great guys, that ability to see the big picture, to say, I'm going to change this tiny thing because it's going to change this story. That's a common trait of an autistic person. Downside is that we're easily overloaded, so we get sent 48 things that we can't comprehend. That is stressful. Don't make us have that stress. Because you already know the answers, don't shave off the time of going through, labeling things very carefully. I don't actually need to know the instruments. I don't need to know that you used Vital version 3.47589, preset 29. I don't care. I really don't care. It's not useful information. There where Jake has noted that it's that his organ is a transistor, that's a little bit useful, because a transistor and a B3 do not quite sound the same. It's not vital. I'd listen to it and probably go, oh, that sounds like a transistor. Where's your B3? But, it's not bad information to have. The fact that it's organ, and by saying transistor, he is showing me sort of what this is supposed to do, what it's supposed to feel like. Because a Vox Continental and a B3, you're probably going to use differently. One of them's B52s, and the other is John Lord. So it's fine, but put in the time and energy to name your tracks. Super important. All right, so what I would then do is, normally I'll drag absolutely everything in one go. I'll show you roughly how that goes. Because I know the BPM, I've already set that up. I'm now going to drag these into here. Now I'm probably going to cut the video at some stage here so that we come back when they're in. And we are back. We now have all of our things in. You can see 44, they're all numbered, they've all come in order, which is brilliant. Now a little bit of talk about what format, what bit rates and depths and what have we get. People will try to tell you in groups and forums you've got to send the largest, craziest file. Okay, fine. If you happen to have a record deal with Sony, and you know that you are writing the next Breakfast in America that's going to be selling in 40, 50 years' time, maybe you will be right to use 2496 or massive sample rates, high sample rates. Otherwise, if this is a entry-level indie production, 16-bit 44K, people will try and tell you it's not good enough. Okay, fine, leave them to it. The reality is that even 44K at 24-bit massively bloats the size of the files, and the larger your files, the greater chance you have of something going wrong. Even with a powerful modern machine, and this is a bit of a beast, it does dramatically increase the chances of something going wrong. So don't increase the chances of something going wrong, either for yourself or for the person who's doing the work. People will say, oh, but it gives you extra headroom. Okay. A CD, 1644, has something like 104 dB of headroom. Let me tell you, the average modern production has between 2 and 6 dB of headroom. So what does it matter whether you've got 104 dB, which is silence, or 200, or whatever the stupid number is? Some pedant will probably want to type it below, and yeah, whatever. It's not wrong, but it's just not relevant, because that extra dynamic range is not used by anybody. No one can hear it. Okay, maybe your cat or maybe the rats in the ceiling can hear it, but they don't buy records on Bandcamp. So let's not fuss too much about them. So 1644. 16-bit file is just fine. 44K is just fine. That is the standard for a CD. That is the basic standard for Bandcamp, YouTube, anywhere. Higher rates do not give you any appreciable improvement whatsoever. If your mix engineer asks specifically for higher, that's fine, and if you feel like sending it, but if they get all like about rate, I think they're probably talking about the wrong things. Keep it as simple as you can. You're not shaving off anything at all other than adding layers of difficulty, which likely shave something off down the track. So 16-bit 44K is absolutely plenty for almost anything that you're going to be doing in the foreseeable future. Not being negative, just being practical. And practical is what gets the job done every day. So now we have all of Jake's stuff in. We can clearly see we're in time because he starts his kick right there and he starts his struminations and what have you. Okay, he's starting right from the beginning. That is good. He knows I don't like dead air at the beginning of a song. Some people still work on this idea that, oh, you have to have dead air at the beginning. Fair enough, you might have a bar if you've got some grace notes. Do, do, do. That's going to come at the end of a bar, which means we're going to have an extra bar with a fair amount of silence on the beginning. We can deal with that when we get there. Like we can possibly just export this bit rather than the whole thing. I mean, I know that's not full bar, but you get the point. But try not to send unnecessary gaps at the beginning because of some kind of perceived professionalism. It starts right at the beginning, right where it should, and that's what you want to do. So that way it's going to export right, and we're not going to have weird empty dead air when somebody hits the play button. When I DJ'd, it was awful when singles came out with dead air. Fair enough if they had a preamble, like NSYNC's Bye 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 had a preamble, and I knew I had to go in and chop it off. That's fine. That's part of the role of being a DJ. But if it was a cold start like that, but there's like a second or so of dead air, gone. Don't do it. People press play wanting to hear your song, so don't waste air. We've got everything. Everything has come through in order. That's really good. I can see that. It's all tidy. It is multicolored. And this now comes down to just arrangement, which is more about what happens on my side than on your side. But let's look at what we do have. And this is going to be super important. It's really important not to send effects through. I get so many people send things and they've already got effects over everything. There's two places from which those effects have come, or three places. What we're hearing as reverb there is something that's printed into that sample. Fair enough. In that case, go with it. Drums recorded in a drum room have room attached to them. Samples often have room or some other processing reverb that was put on them to make them mix ready. Sounds nice, but it can be a bit of a noose. But so long as they are quality, clean enough samples or suit the piece, we learn to live with that. These are in stereo, which will annoy the patootie out of me. I'll put them in mono when we come to mixdown, because otherwise we're going to have stereo of lots of different rooms, because each of these samples will come from a different place, most likely. Therefore, there'll be a sense of weirdness of them not belonging together. Forcing them to mono will fix that. What else have we got? We've got, well, that's all drums, which is good. Tambourines and bass. Okay, this is going to be a real bass. Let's clear my, there we go. I very rarely work this way. Now, Jake hasn't noted in this case whether that's cabinet or DI. It's got a sense of air around it, but I don't really care. It's a nice performance, but it's dry. He's not put on any third-party things. This is, therefore, the third place where things come from. The first place being baked into the sample. You can't really change those much. I can do some, but just be careful when you choose sounds that if they do have baked in ambience, that is going to be relevant, or at least choppable. Number two is that, and it's not the case here, but it could be with one of the others, but Jake knows better, if we've got something coming off where's his organ here? Let's have a listen to this. No, good lad, that's dry, that's clean. There's some drive and what have you possibly, but that's part of the sound of that of that little combo organ. The reality is, though, that a lot of sample things sound good because they've put effects on them, turned them off. So if you've opened Contact or Omnisphere or Falcon or whatever synth, chances are there's effects all over that sound. Now, some of them may be vital for the sound, but many of them probably are going to be a problem. If unsure and you feel like, oh, if I take these off or too many of these off, we're going to have a problem, then send me 2 versions of the sound. Just note them. You know, super synth sound, dry. Super synth sound, all effects. Then I can tell where you were going with it. And that should be in your guide mix up top, but I can tell where you're going with it, and I can decide which I'm going to work with, either one or both. But if you only send me the one slathered in effects, if those effects aren't working for your mix, I either have to make a poorer quality mix than I would want to do, which wrecks your chances of getting fans. Remember, every bit we shave off, we lose, for roughly every 1% we shave off, we lose 20% on fans. If you were set to get 3 fans, you might get 2 or 1 by shaving corners, by going, oh, but, this is hardcore, but mixing is hardcore. Rock and roll is hardcore. And that's the real pronus, in the sense of having the guts to be hardcore about this, which means that you've got to be hardcore about preparing your stems as well. As I say, the first couple of times it's harrowing, it's not much fun, but once you get used to it, it becomes it's not fun. It's not like drinking Coke and eating lollies, but it gets the job done, and that's important. So turn off any effects that you can at the synthesizer level, and definitely don't go adding any effects afterwards, going like, oh, but that sounds too dry and creepy and doesn't represent what I want, man, so I'm going to add all these effects to it. No. If you've done that, and you have to in your guide mix, and really you don't need to, because the whole idea of a mix engineer is that if they're good, they're going to hear the story, or you can be giving them an idea of the story. Well, look, I want this to have the feel of a haunted house or whatever. Don't get silly about it. Don't go sending 48 different songs where there was a wolf howling and going, oh, but it's got to be like this bit here and that bit there. That's silly. That's just... A good engineer will know the story that you're trying to tell and understand the feel and bring that through. They're not going to be spending time talking to you about technicalities, even though this video is a far more technical approach, because it's a technical subject. So give it dry, and that way, when I'm listening to this, not only on its own, a little bit of plate reverb's probably going to go very nicely there, but once I get it in the context of the mix, what role is this organ playing? Often B3s and what have you can be behind and act like a spindle of a mix, so that defines how I'm going to process that sound to fit with the mix. So no effects at all. If you think something needs an effect and wouldn't work without it, guitars, okay, what have we got here? I can't tell offhand whether that's through his Black Star, because I know he's got a nice Black Star, saw it in his video, or whether that's DI, don't care. But there's drive on that. So that's part of the sound. If Jake's at all like, I'm not sure whether that's the sound Benedict's going to want, he's going to send me a DI of that as well. So one will be riff high wet, riff high DI, or dry. I can pick and choose between one, none, both. All depends on what we need for the song. So Name things well. Order them. If you can put numbers on the front, that is absolutely superb. I might rearrange that, but it helps me to see the logic of where you're going. When you're working, always prepare for the next guy. If I know that there's a mastering engineer coming after me, I would prefer to talk to the mastering engineer first. If he won't talk to me, I suggest that the artist gets a different one, but if he's going to go with them, regardless, I will try to find out what he's going to want, how he's going to want it, and prepare for him, because A, it makes him feel more positive about the material that he's getting, which helps everyone, but because in my mix, I'm chasing a particular direction, a particular feel. So if we go with the haunted house feel, which is probably not relevant for songs about not talking about CDs anymore, but if we go with the haunted house thing, then rather than me writing him lists of things, well, I want those 47 seconds from Witches, and I want them 12 seconds from The Witcher episode 47B, where the this, the that. He's not going to look at any of that. I give the audio cues for how I mix it. So if I mix the creaky doors and the Vincent Price, the thriller, fairly dominant in the mix, then he's going to know that Haunted House is a feel of this, and therefore follow that lead that he's being given. So when you're preparing things, you can help set the tone of what you're doing. You show what you're doing with the way that you arrange things and name things. So I'm guessing that Jake probably, seeing he chose a transistor organ, possibly, whether he was aware of it or not, wanted a brighter organ sound in the mix. He's told me that without having to say, Benedict, you have to give me a bright organ mix sound like, that song from the guy in the, So guide. Not only with the guide mix and how you balance things up, remember no side chaining or garbage, but just how you balance things up, just to give a sense of that's what I'm trying to achieve here. The same with your ordering it and your naming. Number of them if you can, because it's brilliant. Spends a little bit more time when you put them together, but absolutely brilliant when you pull it in and you've got, I can see an order here. I might change that order to suit myself, but I've still become aware of your order. No effects. If you think that effect is going to be necessary, either print 2 versions of that track, a wet and a dry, or if it's come from a send effect and that's the only way to do it, then give me a stem, in which case that could be stem 16, tambourine hit 1, 17, tambourine hit 1, echo. And when I solo that one, it's just going to be ting, ting. I probably could have done that myself, but in that case, if you think there's something that it must be there, or you really want to get that idea across, print it as another track. Then I can tell what you're doing. Even if I don't use it, even if I replace it, I can tell what you're doing. That's how you lead. We've talked about bit depth, so 1644 is all you need. That is CD quality. There is not going to be any problem. Anybody who's making mixes, and if you've listened to their work, and you should be listening to their work, that's on you. It's not for them to go chasing you, saying, listen to this. Go and research their work. If they don't have a portfolio, I question why you're hiring them. If you're getting a freebie so they can try and get a portfolio, fair enough. But there's probably some other reason why you've decided to trust them. You've possibly heard something they've done, or you heard them speak and go, I like the cut of his jib. Whatever. But if you're hiring a professional and they don't have probably a website, definitely a portfolio, preferably a portfolio that either shows them across different kinds of material, or if they're one of those guys who's going to niche into only doing this things. I only mix black metal bands who play material between 128 and 129.5 BPM. That's fine. They've got the right to do that. It's not my path, but it's a path that some guys take. That's okay as well. I work differently. I don't work by genre. I work by story or feel. In which case, if you look across, you'll find me across different genres, but hopefully you'll see, yeah, that Benedict guy helps tell story. He helped get the story of that material across. So look for someone who's got portfolio. It's up to you to research them. And you know what I love is when someone comes to me and says, Benedict, I encountered you through this song that you mixed, or through this conversation that was had on such and such a place. I really liked with what you did with X. You know, that song you mixed, say, Cop Souls. Man, that's frightening stuff, man. That is super. Good, because I know that you've researched me. I know that you're starting to understand how the Benedict thing works. Prepare those stems, get them sent off, and then I can put them in and start to do the work. That's probably more time than you wanted to spend to this. I will put a numbered thing on screen as well, so you can see what's going on. If you have any broad questions, ask them on down below. If you want to hire me, then delighted. Make sure that you choose which path you want to hire me under, whether that's directly through my website. Please fill in the form. I know there's a lot of questions, but fill in the form. Or if you want to go to, my preference for the hiring sites is Air Gigs. I think they have a better system. I just prefer it there. Then again, come and show me your work. I just can't say I'm interested if you say, do you want to mix my song? Full stop. Show me your song. If I can't hear your song, I can't tell you whether I feel like I feel its story. And also tell me how many stems or multi-tracks, how many tracks are there going to be? So count these things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stems. If it's fewer, if it's just going to be a music bed and so many vocals, tell me that, because that helps me to understand what I've got to do. Do I like what I hear? Do I feel like I'm going to be able to add value? Because if I don't feel like I can add value, I am going to decline. I know you might be like, oh, but he said no, he doesn't love my stuff. I just don't feel connected to your stuff. I feel like somebody else is going to do better. If I happen to know the name of someone who I think is going to do better, I will give it to you, and preferably, hopefully, you will actually go chase them down and say, hey, that Benedict cat told me, because that's professional. If I'm interested, I'll let you know, and we will go from there. And then please follow what we've talked about here. Send a good stem or multi-track pack that has your guide mix, that tells me the tempo. If it tells me the key and scale that you're in, even better, because sometimes that's really helpful, especially for managing bass. If I know that you are in E flat minor, then it's mostly the E bit that I need to know. But if I know that, then if I'm trying to manage the bass a little bit more precisely, which sometimes is a thing, sometimes is a not, then I can actually know exactly where to focus for your fundamental. So it's good information to have. So tempo, key and signature if you can, the guide mix, really important. I will mix without a guide mix and I will mix without a tempo, but there's a higher chance of things going wrong, and if they do go wrong as a result of not having those things, any extra work that happens after that point will be on you. Therefore, you'll be paying for it. You might be like, but that's not... But it's like, yeah, professionalism has to come from both sides. So if you send an unprofessional pack for mixing, as in it's incomplete, you'll get an incomplete result. Remember, every bit you shave off more in the results. So put more in, as long as it's not overkill, but put more in rather than shaving off, which is like, Jake goes and numbers them. Brilliant. Could get away without it, but then I spend a lot of time getting annoyed having to put things in order, whereas here they're already in order unless I decide I want to move them. But I never move Jake's because he knows what order they're going to be in, and that's basically where they're going to stay. And that's good because he's gotten to know me, and the more you work with the same people and really engage and understand their process, and if they're smart, they're trying to engage and understand your process right from the beginning, which is why I want to hear your stuff and have you talk to me like a person, then the stronger that relationship gets. And so, you know, over a period of time, you can have relationships, you know, the Elton John, Bernie Taupin kind of relationships where you can sort of walk in and out of things and where they will go, hey, why don't you do that? And rather than getting egotistical about it, you go, bugger me, that's a grand idea. Who doesn't want their MTV, eh? You have a great day now.